how a messed up childhood shapes your entire life. The shocking truth, most of us don't realize it, but the way we think, feel, and react to the world today was shaped long before we had the ability to understand it. Our childhoods, especially the painful parts, don't just exist in the past. They live within us, shaping every decision we make, every relationship we enter, and every belief we hold about ourselves and the world. And the most shocking part, most of this happens without us even realizing it. Imagine a child who grows up in a home where love is conditional. Maybe they were praised only when they achieved something, or affection was withdrawn whenever they made a mistake. At the time, they wouldn't have questioned it. It was simply the way the world worked. But fast forward to adulthood, and that same child now struggles with perfectionism, terrified of failure because deep down they believe that love must be earned. Or take a child who was constantly criticized, told they weren't good enough, made to feel small, but Mateus, a neural bead. Years later, they hesitate to take risks, sabotage their own success, or settle for unhealthy relationships, not because they aren't capable, but because their childhood taught them that they don't deserve better. And here's where it gets even more unsettling. The brain is wired for survival, not happiness. So when we experience pain, neglect, or instability as children, our minds adapt. We develop coping mechanisms, ways to protect ourselves emotionally. But these defenses don't just disappear when we grow up. They become part of us. If we learn to suppress our emotions to avoid conflict, we'd carry that emotional numbness into adulthood. If we learn that people are unpredictable and unsafe, we struggle with trust long after we've left the environment that taught us that lesson. The past doesn't stay in the past. It follows us, silently dictating our choices, our fears, our limitations. But the scariest part, many of us never connect the dots. We think we're just bad at relationships, or afraid of commitment, or not meant for success. We blame ourselves for the patterns we keep repeating, not realizing that these patterns were programmed into us before we even had a choice. And because we don't see the root cause, we chase the wrong solutions. We look for happiness in external achievements, hoping that success will heal the wounds of feeling unworthy. We jump from relationship to relationship, hoping that love from another person will fill the void inside us. We distract ourselves with work, entertainment, or even self-destructive habits, anything to avoid sitting alone with the weight of what we've been carrying. So here's the real question. If so much of who we are today was shaped by childhood experiences we never chose, do we actually have free will? Or are we just living out scripts that were written for us long ago? And if that's true, how do we break free?
Click subscribe to this channel to get more profound insights.
The hidden beliefs running your life without you knowing. We like to think we're in control of our lives. That the decisions we make, who we love, what we pursue, how we handle conflict are conscious choices. But what if they aren't? What if, beneath the surface of our daily lives, there's an invisible force shaping everything we do? And that force is belief. Not the kind of belief we actively choose, like religious faith or political opinions, but the kind that was imprinted onto us when we were too young to question it. These beliefs don't live in our conscious minds, they live in our subconscious, quietly dictating our actions, our fears, and our limits. And the most dangerous part, we don't even realize they're there. A child who grows up feeling abandoned, whether emotionally or physically, doesn't just experience loneliness in the moment they develop a belief, I am not worthy of love. That belief doesn't disappear when they grow up. It embeds itself deep inside them, influencing how they interpret the world. When a friend cancels plans, they don't just see it as an isolated event, they see confirmation of what they've always feared: people leave me. When they enter relationships, they either cling too tightly, terrified of being left again, or push people away before they get too close because deep down, they believe love is something that will inevitably be taken away. And yet, if you ask them why they act this way, they probably wouldn't trace it back to childhood. They might say, "I just have trust issues," or "I'm just bad at relationships." They don't see the belief running the show. And it's not just love. A child who grows up in chaos, where the rules constantly change, where anger erupts without warning, where safety is never guaranteed, develops a different belief. The world is unpredictable and dangerous. That belief shapes how they navigate life. They might become hyper-independent, believing they can only rely on themselves. Or they might develop anxiety, always bracing for the next disaster, even when things are going well. And yet, if you ask them why they feel this way, they wouldn't say, "Because my childhood taught me that safety is an illusion." They'd say, "I just worry a lot," or "That's just how I am." They don't see the belief running their life. This is why so many of us feel stuck. We work hard, but we always seem to self-sabotage right before success. We want love, but we keep choosing emotionally unavailable partners. We crave connection, but we isolate ourselves when people get too close. On the surface, it makes no sense. But when you dig deeper, you realize that these patterns aren't random. They are the natural outcomes of beliefs we absorbed long ago, beliefs that were never ours to begin with. And here's the real tragedy: most of us go our entire lives without questioning these beliefs. We think, "This is just who I am." But that's a lie. You were not born with these beliefs. You were not born believing you were unworthy, or that love was dangerous, or that happiness must be earned through suffering. You were taught these things, whether by words, by actions, or by the silent lessons of neglect. And if you were taught them, that means they can be unlearned. But unlearning is not easy, because these beliefs don't exist as thoughts we can simply erase. They exist as emotional truths. They live in the nervous system, in the way our bodies react to stress, in the way we flinch at kindness because it feels unfamiliar. You don't just wake up one day and decide to stop believing you're unworthy. You have to work through the emotional weight of that belief. You have to sit with the discomfort of receiving love when your body has only known rejection. You have to challenge the instinct to self-sabotage when things go well. You have to actively rewrite the script that has been running in the background of your life for decades. And that is terrifying, because if these beliefs are not who we are, then who are we beneath them? If we strip away the fear, the limitations, the defenses we've built, what's left? And can we even handle the weight of that realization? The truth is, healing is not just about letting go of pain. It is about confronting the terrifying possibility that we have been living a version of ourselves that was never truly ours. It is about realizing that the walls we built to protect ourselves have also kept us trapped. And it is about making a choice to continue living in the comfort of familiarity or to step into the unknown and reclaim our lives. But before we can do that, we need to ask ourselves the hardest question of all. If the beliefs we hold about ourselves were given to us by others, then what do we actually believe? Who are we when we are no longer defined by our past? And are we brave enough to find out? Why we repeat the pain we swore to escape, it's one of the cruelest ironies of life. The very pain we swore we would never relive is the pain we keep finding ourselves trapped in. People who grew up with emotionally distant parents find themselves drawn to partners who make them feel invisible. Those who were abandoned in childhood end up in relationships where they are constantly chasing someone who won't fully commit. People who were criticized or made to feel small gravitate toward environments that reinforce their feelings of inadequacy. It's as if, no matter how much we try to escape the wounds of our past, we keep walking in circles right back into them. At first glance, this makes no sense. Why would we keep choosing what hurt us? Why would someone who grew up in a chaotic household end up in relationships full of instability? Why would someone who felt unloved as a child seek out partners who make them feel the same way? The answer is not that we enjoy suffering. It's that the mind craves what is familiar, even when it's painful. From a young age, we learn what love looks like, what safety feels like, what relationships are supposed to be. If we grew up in an environment where love was mixed with neglect, or kindness came with conditions, or emotional connection was always just out of reach, then that becomes our blueprint. We internalize it, not because we want to repeat it, but because it is the only model of love, safety, and belonging we have ever known. And when we go out into the world, we unconsciously seek what feels familiar, even if what feels familiar is the very thing that hurts us. This is why people who grew up feeling unworthy of love often find themselves in relationships where they have to prove their worth over and over again. It's not that they enjoy being unappreciated, it's that deep down they believe love has to be earned, because that's what childhood taught them. And so, they are drawn to situations that reinforce this belief, mistaking struggle for passion, mistaking inconsistency for excitement, mistaking emotional starvation for love. And it's not just relationships. This pattern plays out in careers, friendships, even in the way we talk to ourselves. Someone who grew up in an environment where they were constantly criticized will often become their own harshest critic, and continuing the cycle of self-judgment long after the original voices are gone. Someone who was never allowed to express emotions as a child will struggle to connect with their own feelings as an adult, dismissing their needs as unimportant. And those who grew up in homes where love was unpredictable will often find themselves walking on eggshells, but even in situations where no threat exists, because their nervous systems are being wired for survival, always anticipating the next emotional blow. Breaking this cycle is one of the hardest things a person can do, because it requires going against everything that feels natural. It means choosing partners who feel boring at first because they don't trigger the emotional highs and lows we've mistaken for love. It means learning to sit with kindness without waiting for the other shoe to drop. It means recognizing when our instincts are leading us toward familiar pain and making the terrifying choice to walk in the opposite direction. But here's the real challenge. Healing doesn't just mean avoiding toxic patterns. It means confronting the part of us that still craves them. Because as much as we tell ourselves we want peace, stability, and love, there is a part of us buried deep in the subconscious that finds comfort in the chaos. Not because we enjoy suffering, but because suffering is what we have always known. So the real question is not just, why do I keep ending up in the same painful situations? The question is, what part of me is still seeking out this pain? What part of me is afraid of something different? What part of me believes I don't deserve better? And perhaps the hardest question of all, if I let go of these patterns, if I truly step into something new, who will I be without the pain that has defined me for so long? The hard truth about healing, why it gets worse before it gets better healing, is not beautiful, at least not in the way people imagine. It is not a smooth, upward journey toward peace and self-love. It is not a montage of meditation, therapy sessions, and morning routines that magically erase decades of pain. Healing is brutal, it is messy, and worst of all, it often feels like getting worse rather than better. Because real healing is not about becoming a new person, it is about confronting everything you have spent your entire life running from. At first, things seem to improve. You set boundaries, you walk away from toxic relationships. You start recognizing the patterns that have controlled you for years. And for a moment, it feels like you're winning. But then, something unexpected happens. The loneliness creeps in. The discomfort rises. The very pain you thought you were escaping comes back stronger than before. And you start to wonder, wasn't healing supposed to make me feel better? What no one tells you is that healing is not just about letting go. It is about grieving. When you leave behind the patterns that once defined you, you are mourning a version of yourself. The version that tolerated mistreatment because they didn't know love could be different. The version that kept quiet to keep the peace. The version that settled for less because they didn't believe they deserved more. Even if these parts of you were shaped by pain, they were still parts of you. And when they start to fade, it feels like a loss. And then there's the fear. Because once you begin to heal, you step into the unknown. For so long, you have been navigating life based on old wounds, choosing relationships, careers, and habits that fit the blueprint of your past. But when you break free, you are left with a terrifying question. If I am no longer defined by my pain, then who am I? If I am no longer chasing love that hurts, what does love even look like? If I am no longer proving my worth, then what is my purpose? That's why so many people give up. Not because they don't want to heal, but because healing requires them to sit in the discomfort of not knowing. It demands that they resist the pull of their old life, even when it would be so much easier to slip back into what is familiar. And this is the moment that defines everything. Do you go back to what is comfortable but painful? Or do you keep moving forward, even when it feels like you are walking through fire? The truth is, healing is not a destination. It is not something you achieve and then check off your list. It is a lifelong process of unlearning, relearning, breaking, rebuilding. Some days you will feel powerful, as if you have finally stepped into the life you were meant to live. Other days you will feel lost, as if the weight of your past is pulling you back. But every time you choose to keep going, every time you choose growth over comfort, hit self-respect over familiarity, you are rewriting the story that was written for you long before you had a say in it. And maybe that is the real meaning of healing, not erasing the past, but proving to yourself that you are more than it, that you are not doomed to repeat what broke you, that you are capable of building a life that is not rooted in survival, but in something deeper, something real. So the real question is not just, how do I heal? The question is, when everything in you wants to go back to the life you swore you would leave behind, will you still choose to move forward? And if you do, can you trust that one day, even if it takes years, that even if it feels impossible now, you will wake up and realize that the life you once thought was out of reach is the life you are finally living?